actually had a bit of a victory, right? This is a story we broke last week. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, well, in The Guardian, we had it was reporting that The Guardian did some great reporting on this as well. They're reporting that COVID-19, the Lancet retracts paper that halted hydrochloroquine trials. And this was a day after our show. This was last Friday.
Wow.
In The Guardian, they quote, reading from them, the lead author, Professor Mandeep Mehra, from the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, decided to ask the Lancet for their retraction because he could no longer vouch for the data's accuracy. The journal editor, Richard Horton, said he was appalled by the developments. Quote, said, this is a shocking example of research misconduct in the middle of a global health emergency. So basically what happened after weeks...
Wow.
After weeks and weeks of questions, the Lancet commissioned an independent third-party peer review of this paper. Now, last week we went over all the issues with the paper.
Yeah.
Way too many to bring up right now, but this paper had so many holes. This is just Swiss cheese of questions. So many holes in the data in this paper.
And my favorite part of that story was just the fact that the head of the small data collection group, which was supposed to be the most powerful data system in the world, is run by, if I remember correctly, a science fiction writer and an internet adult model and a couple of other people. I mean, this story was absolutely hysterical as it started crumbling down around. And to think that the power entities of the world, WHO, and it was falling right in line with the narrative that Tony Fauci keeps trying to push, right? He doesn't want a treatment to work. If it's not clear to you folks, he keeps saying the only way I'm going to allow you to get back to a normal life is when we have a vaccine. I mean, to imagine a medical professional that does not believe a treatment is possible says to me, this is a man saying, I don't see it, I don't see it, I don't want it. And it looks to me this Lancet paper very much was following an agenda of some very powerful of the Illuminati clown contingency.
Yeah, you know, listen, the people made this happen. They really did. They placed it in the open source community of social media. People around the world did collaborative research on this paper and pointed out all the holes in this, and were shouting at the rooftops of how bad this paper was. And that really, from the timeline of things, it was only at that point that the Guardian picked that up, and then the Lancet called for the independent peer review. But what the Lancet found when they called for that, so they had a third-party independent peer review of this paper. Surgisphere, that's the company behind the data, wouldn't divulge their full data sets, wouldn't divulge the contracts that they claim they had with over 600 hospitals, which is a ridiculous number. I mean, it would be headlines across the world if this company existed, because it would have such accurate data, and they wouldn't show their coding a la the Imperial model. So the Lancet pulled it. And they couldn't even get to square one when they investigated this paper. Meanwhile, the people have already sussed out all the issues with the paper. The Lancet says, well, let's look into this. They can't even get to square one. So they pulled the paper. And one last point, Richard Horton is the Lancet editor. In 2015, I said, where have I heard that name before? 2015, he made a quote, and I think it bears repeating now, almost 5-6 years later here. He says, quote, the case against science is straightforward. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may be simply untrue, afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analysis, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance. Science has taken a turn towards darkness. I mean, those are powerful words. And I asked Richard, how do you feel about this Lancet paper if this is how you're talking in 2015? Because it kind of looks like those are exactly what was happening here. And, in 2015, he also said that journal editors deserve their fair share of criticism, too, because they aid and abet the worst behaviors. So have we learned anything in 5 years?
Apparently not. And at a time where people's lives, if it ends up being true, let me try and be as objective as I can possibly be, that the 200 studies around the world of thousands and thousands of patients having a 99% success rate using hydroxychloroquine as a part of the treatment, if that was delayed because of this paper that was published in the Lancet and the WHO and the fears by Anthony Fauci, people were murdered by misinformation. You know, while Facebook is really busy trying to find some other perspective than what we're sharing on the HighWire to say that that's false information, why don't you deal with the people that are getting people killed? Jeffrey, incredible reporting. Of course, anyone that is interested, and if you have the ability to read, you really want to check out the Jackson Report on the HighWire.com. That's where Jeffrey Jackson's writing brilliant articles, getting deeper into many of the issues we're covering here. Jeffrey, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.